Sylvia Holbrook stood in the yellow dust outside the Mercy Creek depot with a torn letter clutched against her ribs and hunger, making her knees shake. The noon train had left her behind like unwanted freight, and every face along the boardwalk turned to stare at the soot on her cuffs, the patched hem of her dress, and the shame she could not explain. A shopkeeper's wife whispered that no decent girl arrived alone with a burned sleeve and half a letter. The sheriff told her she had 1 hour to leave town or name who sent her. Then Holden Pruitt, the blind cowboy with the scarred eyes and the hard mouth, stopped his horse beside her and listened while everyone else judged. He could not see her torn dress, but he heard the way she swallowed pain. Before this frontier story unfolds, comment the country you are watching from. If you believe one kind cowboy can change a forgotten woman's life, subscribe so you do not miss the next romance. The torn letter had been folded so many times that the edges felt soft as old cloth. Sylvia Holbrook kept it pressed beneath her palm while the wind tried to take it from her. One half of the page was gone, burned ragged across the middle, leaving only broken lines that made her look guiltier than silence ever could. Come west before winter. Do not trust. The fire was not, and then nothing but black curled paper. She had read those words so often that they had carved themselves into her mind. They were the last thing her aunt had ever sent. They were also the reason every man in Mercy Creek was watching Sylvia like she had brought ruin in her carpet bag. The depot platform smelled of coal smoke, horse sweat, and hot iron. Dust rose around her boots each time a wagon passed. Her stomach cramped so sharply she had to lean against the depot post, but she would not sit down. Sitting down would make her look weaker, and weakness drew either pity or cruelty. She had known both. The train had taken the last of her money and left her with nothing but a cracked valise, the torn letter, and a name written on the surviving corner. Mercy Creek. That was all. No address, no promise, no person waiting. The station master, Mr. Abner Cole, stood in front of her with his tomes hooked into his vest. He was a narrow man with a narrow voice, and he had already asked her 3 times where she meant to go. I told you, Sylvia said quietly. I came because of a letter, a half-burned letter, and a summons, Cole said. And this town had enough trouble with fire last month. Folks are particular now. At the word fire, the whispering grew. Sylvia looked down. Her cuff was scorched because she had reached into flames for that letter. Her palms had healed badly, the skin tight and shiny where blisters had broken. She kept her hands folded to hide them, but Mrs. Hester Dane had seen enough to start murmuring. That girl knows something, Mrs. Dane said from the edge of the platform. Look at her. No family, no fare forward, and burned hands. Mark me, nothing good follows a girl with secrets. Sylvia tasted dust and hunger. She wanted to say that secrets were not always sins. Sometimes they were the last shelter a person had. But she had learned that the truth could kill faster than a lie if placed in the wrong hands. The sheriff stepped closer. Garnett Bell was not unkind, but he had a town to calm and a reputation to protect. He glanced at the torn letter in Sylvia's hand. Miss Holbrook, he said, you arrived on the morning train with no ticket onward, no place to stay, and no clear explanation. Folks are worried because of the Pruitt barn fire. I'm not saying you had anything to do with it, but if you know something about fire, or if you came connected to it, now would be the wise time to speak. Pruitt. The name moved through the crowd like a wire being plucked. Sylvia raised her eyes. Pruitt, you know the name? The sheriff asked. She hesitated too long. Mrs. Dane made a small, satisfied sound. Sylvia tightened her grip on the torn letter until her burned palms stung. Only from hearing it just now. That was a lie. Not all of one, but enough of one to darken her face with shame. The sheriff sighed. Then here is the choice. You can come with me to the office until this is sorted, or you can take the afternoon freight east when it stops. Either way, you cannot sleep on the platform. I have no money for another ticket. Fanzu should have thought of that before coming. The words did not come from the sheriff. They came from a young man leaning against the general store rail, polished boots crossed at the ankles. His hair was oiled, his collar clean, his smile mean without effort. Silas Dane, Mrs. Dane's son. Sylvia knew men like him. Men who smiled only when someone smaller was cornered. Maybe she expected a husband to be waiting. Silas said, "Ain't that how some poor girls do it? Send a pretty letter, then show up hungry." A few men laughed. Sylvia's cheeks burned. She was not pretty, and had never pretended to be. Plain brown hair, plain gray eyes, too thin from hard travel, too tired to stand straight. Back in Ohio, one woman had told her she looked like a candle after the flame had been pinched out. She had believed it. The depot horse trough shimmered in the heat. For one breath, Sylvia imagined walking to it and drinking from her hands like a stray dog. She hated herself for wanting to. Then a horse stopped at the edge of the crowd. No one had heard it approach over the wagon noise, but everyone heard the leather creak when the rider shifted in the saddle. The horse was a tall bay with a white blaze. The man sitting above it wore a dark hat pulled low, a trail coat faded by sun, and gloves though the day was warm. His face was lean and browned, with a scar that crossed from his left temple toward the bridge of his nose. His eyes were open, but they did not settle on any face. They looked past the crowd, unfocused, pale with old injury. Holden Pruitt. Sylvia knew it before anyone said his name. The crowd changed around him, not kinder, just quieter. Sheriff Bell took off his hat. Holden, Sheriff. The cowboy's voice was low and rough, like it had crossed dry country before reaching his mouth. "Who's being driven out?" "No one is being driven out." That an arrow, how it sounded from the street. Silas Dane straightened. "This doesn't concern you, Pruitt." Holden turned his head slightly toward the voice. "Most ugly things in this town don't concern me until someone says they don't." A few men shifted their boots. Sylvia stared at him, unable to help herself. He sat still, one hand resting near the saddle horn, the other holding the reins with practiced ease. Blind, yes, but not helpless. There was a hardness in him that warned people not to mistake darkness for weakness. Sheriff Bell cleared his throat. "Girl came in with no place. Folks are unsettled because of your fire." "My fire?" Holden said. His mouth tightened. "The Pruitt barn fire." Sylvia remembered the missing lines of the letter, the smell of smoke, her aunt's final cry, and the man she had seen through flame-lit glass. "Do not trust." She closed her eyes for half a second. Holden angled his face toward her. "What's your name?" Her throat felt scraped raw. "Sylvia Holbrook." "You eaten today, Sylvia Holbrook?" The question was so plain that she nearly broke. She had not expected kindness. She had prepared for suspicion, warning, might be a jail cell. But not that. "I'm all right," she said, his head tilted. That wasn't an answer. "I can manage." That wasn't either. Silas laughed under his breath. "Careful, Pruitt. Hungry girls with stories cost more than cattle." Holden's gloved hand tightened on the reins. "You offering wisdom, Silas, or just noi?" Silas flushed. Holden spoke toward the sheriff. "I need someone at my ranch." The boardwalk went still. Sheriff Bell frowned. "Holden, my housekeeper, left after the fire. My foreman's wife is doing what she can. But I can't ask her to run 2 homes. If Miss Holbrook needs work, I'll give it." Mrs. Dane stepped forward. "You cannot mean to take a strange girl into your house. I did not ask what you could imagine, Hester. She might be tied to what happened. Then having her near the burned barn might teach us more than running her off." Sylvia looked at him sharply. His help was not trust. It was a bargain with suspicion tucked inside. She should have hated that. Instead, the offer felt like a hand held out from behind a locked door. Sheriff Bell lowered his voice. "Holden, you know people will talk. They already do. You're a single man. I'm a blind man with a burned barn and no cook worth mentioning. If the town wants to make romance out of beans and laundry, it has less sense than I fear." A short, uneasy laugh moved through the crowd. Sylvia could not speak. Pride told her to refuse. Hunger told her pride had never kept anyone warm. Fear told her the Preet name was too close to the ashes she had fled. But the torn letter in her hand told her she had come to Mercy Creek for a reason, and the reason had just found her. Holden leaned down from the saddle. I pay fare. You'll have a room of your own. Mrs. Alder, my foreman's wife, will be there most days until you choose whether to stay. You may leave whenever you like. Why? Sylvia whispered. The crowd could not hear her, but he did. Because you sound, Holden said, after a pause, like someone who has been standing alone too long. A lump rose in her throat. Silas Dane's voice cut in. Or like someone who practiced sounding pitiful. Sylvia's hand trembled. The torn letter slipped, and the wind snapped it open just enough for Holden's name to show on the surviving net. Prue. Sheriff Bell saw it. So did Silas. What is that? The sheriff asked. Sylvia folded the letter fast, but not fast enough. Holden's face changed, not with anger, with listening. Miss Holbrook, the sheriff said carefully. Does that letter say Prut? The platform blurred. Sylvia thought of her aunt's kitchen burning behind her. A lantern overturned, a locked drawer, a man's voice telling someone to search faster. Her aunt pressing the letter into Sylvia's hand and choking out, Mercy Creek, Mercy Creek. Find what was stolen, but don't speak until you know who said it. Then flame has swallowed the doorway. Sylvia could tell them now. She could say she had come because her aunt once worked for Holden Prut's father. She could say the fire in Ohio had been no accident. She could say the torn letter might connect to the fire that blinded Holden and burned his barn. But Silas Dane was watching her too closely, so she lied again. It was an old advertisement. She said, for ranch work. I saw the name and came hoping. Silas smiled as if he had caught a scent. Holden did not smile. Then come hope at the ranch. Sheriff, you know where to find her. Sheriff Bell studied Sylvia, then nodded. I do. Holden turned his horse. Can you walk, Miss Holbrook? I does. She picked up her valise. It was light because nearly everything she owned had been burned or sold. Still, her hands shook. Holden heard the scrape of the handle. Without looking back, he said, tie the bag behind my saddle. Silas muttered, taking in strays now. Holden stopped. This time, when he turned his head, every man on the platform seemed to hold his breath. When a town starts calling hungry women strays, Holden said, you ought to fear what it has become. No one laughed then. Sylvia tied her valise with clumsy fingers. As she followed the blind cowboy down the dusty street, she felt every stare press into her back. She had been given work, not forgiveness, shelter, not safety, but for the first time since the fire, one person had heard her hunger before her shame, and that was enough to keep walking. Holden Pritt rode slowly enough for Sylvia to keep pace, but not so slowly that Mercy Creek could enjoy the sight for long. His horse knew the road out of town, turning by habit at the livery, stepping around ruts, passing the church with its white steeple and the blacksmith shop, with sparks spitting from the open door. Sylvia walked beside the bay's shoulder, her boots filling with dust. The road shimmered toward open range. Behind them, the town noise thinned into hammer strikes, hens fussing, and the fading whistle of the train. For a while, Holden said nothing. That made the kindness feel less soft. He had rescued her in front of everyone, but now his silence built a wall. Sylvia preferred walls she could see. After nearly half a mile, he spoke. You lied about the letter. Her step faltered. The horse kept walking. I did not, she said. Your breathing changed before you answered. Folks think blindness makes a man easier to fool. Mostly it teaches him where people hide. Heat rose in her face. Then, why bring me? Because liars still get hungry. The words struck harder than she expected. I'm not a thief, she said. I didn't say thief. I didn't burn anything in your town. I didn't say that either. Then what are you saying, Mr. Prut? He was quiet long enough that the cicadas filled the road between them. I'm saying my barn burned 4 weeks ago, he said at last. Before that, my father died with debts I did not know he had. Before that, I lost most of my sight in a winter stampede because someone cut a fence gate and spooked our herd. Mercy Creek thinks all those misfortunes are separate. I die. Sylvia's fingers tightened around her skirt. What does that have to do with me? I don't know yet. The honesty unsettled her more than an accusation would have. So I'm not your worker. I am your suspect. You can be both. She stopped walking. Holden rode 3 more steps before the bay halted. On a soft click of his tongue, he turned in the saddle, not toward her exactly, but close enough. Sylvia stood in the road with dust moving around her hem. I have been suspected since I got off that train. I have been whispered over, laughed at, and nearly taken to jail because I am poor enough to be blamed. If you brought me only to watch me, say so plainly. Holden's jaw worked. I brought you, he said, because you looked ready to fall down. You cannot see. I can hear hunger. The anger left her too quickly, and that embarrassed her. Holden reached into his saddlebag and drew out a cloth-wrapped bundle. He held it down toward her, not quite in the right direction. She stared at it. Bread, he said. Dried apple, a little jerky. She did not move. His mouth tightened. Take it before my arm gets tired. I don't want charity. It is not charity. It is the first meal of your employment. I haven't agreed. You stopped walking toward town and kept standing on the road to my ranch. That is most of an agreement. Despite herself, Sylvia almost smiled. Almost. She took the bundle. Her burned fingers brushed his glove. He went still. What happened to your hands? He asked. Work? Not the kind that pays. She opened the cloth, broke off a piece of bread, and ate before pride could stop her. The bread was coarse and dry. It tasted like mercy. Holden faced forward again. There is water in the canteen. She drank carefully and tried not to gulp. The ranch came into view an hour later, spread across low country beneath a white sky. The Pruitt place had once been proud. Sylvia could tell by the stone gateposts, the long porch, the windmill still turning, the corrals built straight and strong. But grief clung to it now. One barn stood blackened at the far side of the yard, its roof half gone, its ribs charred against the light. The smell of old smoke lingered even from the road. Sylvia stopped again. Her stomach turned. Holden heard. That is what is left. I'm sorry, she said. Are you? She looked at him. Yes, he did not answer. A woman came out of the house wiping her hands on an apron. She was sturdy, freckled, and sharp-eyed, with gray in her brown hair and flour on one cheek. Holden Pruitt, she called. Tell me you did not bring home trouble with a skirt on, Mrs. Alder, Holden said, dismounting with practiced care. This is Sylvia Holbrook. She needs work. I need help. Mrs. Alder looked Sylvia over, not cruelly, not kindly either, like a woman measuring fabric for flaws. You cook? A little. Wash? Yes. Rhett? Sylvia hesitated. I do northern cooking, though he hates admitting it. Holden removed his hat. I hate admitting nothing useful. Mrs. Alder snorted. You hate admitting the sun rose if someone else says it first. Sylvia looked between them, surprised by the easy bite of the woman's tone. Holden's expression did not change, but something in his shoulders loosened. Miss Holbrook is to have the east room. Mrs. Alder's brows rose. That was your mother's sewing room. It has a lock. It also has memories. So do all rooms. The words fell heavy. Mrs. Alder softened for half a breath, then turned brisk again. Come on, girl. Let me see those hands. Sylvia drew back. They're fine. No burned hand is fine. And I can smell old salve from here. Holden's head turned. Sylvia cursed herself silently. Inside, the house was cool and shadowed. The hall smelled of cedar, coffee, and smoke that had traveled in on clothes after the barn fire. Mrs. Alder led Sylvia to the kitchen, set her on a chair, and took her hands with surprising gentleness. When she unwrapped the cloth Sylvia had used to cover her palms, Mrs. Alder inhaled through her nose. Who tended these? I did, poorly. I had little choice. Mrs. Alder glanced toward the open kitchen door where Holden stood, one hand on the frame. "These are not from stove work," the woman said. Sylvia looked down. "No," Holden spoke quietly. "From the fire." Sylvia did not answer. Mrs. Alder fetched clean water and a tin of ointment. "Whatever she's hiding, Holden, it can wait until she has skin left." He said nothing, but his silence had edges. Sylvia endured the cleaning without complaint, though tears sprang to her eyes. Mrs. Alder wrapped her palms in clean linen. "You'll not scrub floors for a few days," she said. "You can peel potatoes with a cloth grip and stir with your right hand if you must. Mostly you'll rest. I came to work. You came half-starved." Sylvia lowered her head. The humiliation of being seen so clearly was almost worse than being judged. Holden stepped into the kitchen. "Mrs. Alder, leave us a moment." The older woman frowned. "Do not start in on her like a lawyer. I only need to ask one thing." Mrs. Alder looked as if she might refuse, then left through the back door, muttering about stubborn men and wounded birds. Holden remained standing. Without his hat, he looked younger and more tired. The pale film over his eyes caught the window light. "I have rules," he said. Sylvia waited. "No stealing, no wandering near the burned barn after dark, no speaking with Silas Dane unless I am present." The last rule chilled her. "Why?" "Because Silas Dane has been trying to buy my south pasture for 2 years. Because he profits when others lose. Because when my barn burned, he was the first man on the place and the last man to look surprised." Sylvia's heart beat hard. Holden heard the shift in her breath. "You know him." "No." Another lie. Her eyes stung. "You have no right to pull truth from me like teeth." His face hardened. "And you have no right to bring danger under my roof." "I didn't ask for your roof." "No. You stood on a platform until I offered it." The words were cold, and she flinched. He heard that too. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. "I should not have said it that way." Sylvia stood. "But you meant it." He did not deny. The kitchen seemed suddenly too small. She wanted to run out, past Mrs. Alder, past the black barn, past the gateposts and the town and the railroad until there was no place left where anyone knew the shape of her shame. Instead, she reached into her pocket and took out the torn letter. Holden went very still when he heard the paper crackle. "I came because my aunt died in a fire," Sylvia said. Her voice shook, but she kept going. "She gave me this before she died. She told me to come here. She told me not to trust anyone until I knew who said it. I do not know what it means. I do not know who lied. I only know that every time I speak, someone stronger decides what my words are worth." Holden's face had gone pale under the sun-browned skin. "Your aunt's name," he said. "Maribel Holbrook." He gripped the back of a chair. Sylvia saw the name strike him. "You knew her," she whispered. "My mother knew her," he said. "Before I was born, Maribel worked here." The kitchen clock ticked too loudly. Sylvia unfolded the letter and placed it on the table. "Then, my babe, this belongs to you." Holden did not reach for it. "Read it." She swallowed. "There isn't much left." "Read it." So she did. "Come west before winter. Do not trust." Her voice broke. "The fire was not." She stopped. Holden's breathing changed now. Outside, the windmill creaked. Sylvia waited for accusation, for demand, for the sheriff. Instead, Holden said, "My mother died in a fire too." Sylvia looked up. "Not the barn," he said. "Years ago, I was 16. They called it a kitchen accident. I stopped asking questions when my father told me grief was making me cruel." His mouth twisted with bitterness. "My big grief was the only part of me telling the truth." Sylvia's anger faltered. Holden turned away as if he regretted letting that much show. "Mrs. Alder will show you the room. You might stay tonight. Tomorrow we decide whether this arrangement has sense in it. You still think I might be dangerous. I think everyone is dangerous when they are afraid." He walked toward the hall, then stopped. "And Miss Holbrook." "Yes, I am sorry for what I said about the roof. It was not a full apology. It was not warm, but it was something." Sylvia watched him leave. hearing the careful count of his steps. She looked at the torn letter on the table, then at her bandaged hands. She had found shelter in a house built over old fire, and the blind cowboy, who did not trust her, had just given her the first piece of truth. By the third morning, Sylvia learned the sounds of the Preet ranch. The windmill groaned before dawn. The rooster began too early and sounded insulted by the whirl. Cattle lowed beyond the corrals. Mrs. Alder's steps were firm, Holden's were measured, and the hired hands tried to soften their boots whenever they passed the kitchen, as if a hungry girl with bandaged hands might break from noise alone. Sylvia did not break. She rose before sunup, wrapped her palms, and made biscuits with more determination than skill. The first batch came out hard enough that Mrs. Alder tapped one against the table and said, "That could stop a bullet if the sheriff runs short." Sylvia stared at the pan, mortified. Then Mrs. Alder broke one open, put butter on it, and ate half. "But it ain't burnt." "That's a start." Holden entered just then and paused in the doorway. "Is breakfast safe?" "No," Mrs. Alder said, "but it's brave." Sylvia expected him to refuse. Instead, Holden sat, found the plate by touch, and took a biscuit. He chewed once, then twice. "Well?" Mrs. Alder demanded. Holden swallowed. "I have eaten worse." Sylvia looked down to hide the smallest smile. He added, "On cattle drives. During storms, when men were desperate." Mrs. Alder laughed loud enough to startle a horse outside. Sylvia's smile vanished into embarrassment, but it returned later when she caught Holden quietly reaching for a second biscuit. Trust did not arrive like sunrise. It came in scraps. Holden showed Sylvia how he marked the edges of shelves with small nails so he could find things by touch. She learned not to move his coffee tin, his matches, or the ledger on the desk in the front room. The first time she placed the ledger 3 inches too far left, he knocked over an ink bottle and went rigid with anger. "Do not change what I know," he snapped. Sylvia froze. The ink spread across the desk like black blood. "I'm sorry," she said. He stood breathing hard, one hand clenched around the chair back. "Leave it. I can clean. Leave it," she laughed. That evening, she found him in the barn that had not burned, sitting on an overturned bucket while rain ticked on the roof. He had a bridle across his knees and was oiling the leather by feel. She almost turned away. "I knew it was you," he said. She stopped. "How?" "You stepped like you're apologizing to the floor." The words might have hurt if his voice had not been tired. Sylvia came nearer but kept distance. "I didn't mean to move your ledger. I know. You sounded as if I had done it to harm you. I know that too." The rain grew steadier. Holden drew the cloth along the bridle strap. "After I lost my sight, everybody tried to help. They moved chairs out of my way, cleared tables, took tools from my hands before I asked. Every kindness taught me I no longer belonged in my own life." Sylvia leaned against a post. "So you made rules." "I made a map in my head. The house, the yard, the stable, every latch and shelf. When something moves, the dark moves with it." She looked at his scarred eyes and understood more than she wanted to. "When people pity me, I feel smaller. When they suspect me, I feel meaner. I suppose both can trap a person." He turned the bridle over. "That sounds true." "It is." He nodded once. "I will try not to speak sharp before I know whether I am angry or afraid." Sylvia watched his hands. They were capable hands, even gloved, the kind that had roped calves, mended fence, held reins through storms. But they trembled slightly when searching for the oil tin. She picked it up and set it near his right boot, without touching him. "Tin is by your foot." He found it easily. "Thank you," he said. That was another scrap. On Sunday, Mrs. Alder insisted Sylvia come to church. "I have no dress fit for it," Sylvia said. "You have a clean one. It's plain. God has seen plain before." Mercy Creek Church was small, whitewashed, and crowded with people, eager to pretend they were not looking at her. Sylvia sat near the back with Mrs. Alder on one side and Holden on the other. His presence did not stop the whispers, but it changed their volume. When the hymn began, Sylvia did not sing. Her aunt had sung while kneading bread. After the fire, psalms felt like doors opening into rooms she could not bear to enter. Holden did not sing either. During the sermon, Reverend Pike spoke about mercy, as if it were easy. Sylvia stared at her folded hands and wondered whether mercy counted if people gave it only after someone respectable approved. After service, Mrs. Dane approached with a smile as stiff as new leather. "Miss Holbrook," she said, "I trust the Pruitt place has not overwhelmed you." "No, ma'am. Ranch work can be difficult for girls unaccustomed to honest labor." Sylvia felt Holden shift beside her. She answered before he could. "I am accustomed to labor, Mrs. Dane. Honesty is what I'm still learning to expect from strangers." Mrs. Alder coughed into her glove. Mrs. Dane's eyes narrowed. Bold words for a girl living on charity. Holden's voice came low. "Wages. I beg your pardon." "She earns wages." Mrs. Dane smiled thinner. "Of course." Silas Dane appeared behind his mother, hat in hand, looking polished as ever. "Miss Holbrook, I hope my words at the depot did not wound you too deeply. I am known for speaking without polishing." Sylvia met his eyes and felt cold. He knew her. She was certain now, maybe not by name, but by circumstance. His gaze flicked to her, bandaged hands with recognition too quick to be innocent. "I have heard worse," she said. "I am sure you have." Holden turned his head. "Step away from her." Silas laughed softly. "You always did guard what was not yours, Pruitt." The words seemed casual, but Holden's face closed. Sylvia felt the old tension between them like a rope pulled tight. After church, Holden was silent all the way to the wagon. Mrs. Alder rode in back with supplies, leaving Sylvia on the bench beside him. He held the reins loosely, trusting the horse and rode. "What did he mean?" Sylvia asked. Holden's jaw tightened. "Silas speaks to draw blood. That is not an answer." "No," she waited. He sighed. "Before I lost my sight, I was meant to marry a woman named Clara Whitcomb." Sylvia looked at him, surprised by the small hurt the words caused. "She was pretty," he said, "educated, came from a good family. My father liked the match because her people had money and land east of town." "What happened?" "The stampede happened. My eyes went bad. The doctor said my be shadows, my be shapes, never more." Clara waited 3 weeks before deciding her life required a husband who could see her. Sylvia kept her gaze on the road. "I'm sorry. I was not kind after. To her, to anyone. Grief can make a person cruel." He almost smiled. "You've used that on me before." It fit twice. His hands shifted on the reins. "Silas courted her after. Married her within a year." Sylvia glanced back toward town. "Mrs. Dane's son married the woman you loved?" "I thought I loved her. I loved the version of myself she proved." Cited. Heir to a good ranch. A man people admired without pity. That is still a loss, I.S. The wagon wheels rolled over a rut. Holden added, "Clara died last winter." Sylvia's breath caught. "Aver," he said. Silas wore grief like a new coat. "Fine enough for public view." "You don't believe him." "I believe Silas loves owning what other men lose." The sentence settled between them. That evening, Sylvia sat in the east room, the old sewing room, with the torn letter spread on her lap. The room held a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small table by the window. In one drawer, she had found scraps of blue ribbon and a rusted thimble that must have belonged to Holden's mother. She traced the burned words. "Do not trust Pruitt, Dane, the bank, the sheriff." Her aunt had known the answer. Sylvia had only ashes. A knock came at the door. She folded the letter quickly. "Yes." Holden stood outside with a small wooden box in his hands. "I found something," he said. "Or rather, Mrs. Alder found it after my mother died and hid it because my father ordered her to burn it." Sylvia opened the door wider. He held out the box. "It was my mother's. Letters mostly. I cannot read them. I have not wanted anyone else to. Why bring them to me?" because her aunt's name might be inside. The trust in that choice frightened her. They sat in the front room with a lamp between them. Holden took the chair by the cold fireplace. Sylvia opened the box carefully. It smelled of cedar and old lavender. The letters were tied with ribbon. Her fingers trembled when she found one addressed in fading ink. Maribel Holbrook. Sylvia looked up. She wrote to your mother. Holden's face was still red. The letter told of two young women who had once worked side by side at Prute Ranch. Maribel Holbrook and Eliza Prute, before Eliza married into the name. It spoke of fear, of ledgers altered, of land papers hidden, of a man named Victor Prute doing business with Harlan Dane, Silas' father. Sylvia read slower as the meaning sharpened. Eliza, if anything happens, remember that the South Pasture deed was never legally transferred. Harlan means to press Victor until he yields. The child should inherit clean land, not debt bought with threats. The child, Sylvia whispered. That was you. Holden sat motionless. She read another line. I have copied what I could. If your house is unsafe, send for me. The room seemed to darken around the lamp. Holden's voice was rough. My father told me mother's worries were nerves. Sylvia looked at him. My aunt believed her, and then my mother died in a kitchen fire. And years later, my aunt died in one. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, head bowed. All this time, Sylvia saw the grief in him then, not sharp and loud, but buried under years of believing the wrong person. She wanted to reach for his hand. She did not. Instead, she placed the letter on the table between them. I think my aunt sent for me because she had proof, Sylvia said. Might be proof that your father and Harlan Dane stole or hid something. Might be proof that Silas still wants the South Pasture. Why does it matter so much? Holden's mouth tightened. Water. There's a spring there that has never failed. Without it, the ranch is worth half. With it, a man controls grazing all the way to the ridge. Silas wants your ranch. He wants what his father failed to take. Sylvia looked toward the dark window. For the first time since arriving, her secret had shape. Not safety, but shape. Holden reached toward the table and found the edge of the letter. I owe your aunt, he said. And you gave me bread. That is not the same. No, Sylvia said softly, but it was the first thing I needed. He lifted his face toward her. His scarred eyes held no focus, yet she felt seen in a way that made her chest ache. Tomorrow, he said, we look in the old records. You and I feel help. The word help sounded different from work, different from suspect. Sylvia nodded, then remembered he could not see. Yes, another scrap of trust. Outside, wind moved over the burned barn and across the South Pasture, where water ran hidden under grass. Inside, under lamplight, a blind cowboy and a hungry girl began sorting ashes from truth. The old ranch records were kept in a cedar trunk in Holden's father's room, a room no one used and no one cleaned, unless Mrs. Alder lost patience with dust. Sylvia entered with a lamp in one hand and a feeling that the house itself was holding its breath. Victor Prute's room smelled of stale tobacco, leather, and closed curtains. A rifle rack hung empty on the wall. Spurs lay on the bureau, polished but unworn. Above the bed was a portrait of a stern man with heavy brows. Sylvia looked at it and wondered how many lives could be bent by a father who cared more for pride than truth. Holden stood in the doorway. You do not have to come in, Sylvia said. Yes, I do. But he did not move. She understood. Some rooms were harder to enter than storms. He is not here, she said gently. Holden's mouth pulled tight. That has never stopped him before. After a long moment, he stepped inside. They worked through the morning. Sylvia read names, dates, debts, land descriptions, and cattle counts, while Holden listened with an attention so fierce it seemed to sharpen the air. Most papers were ordinary. Some were troubling. A loan from Harlan Dane. A later note marked paid, though no receipt matched. A map showing the South Pasture, with a different boundary line, drawn in pencil. Near noon, Sylvia found a packet tucked under a false bottom. Holden. He turned from the window. There are letters here. From Harlan Dane to your father. Read them. The first letter was businesslike. The second was less so. By the third, the threat was clear. If Eliza continues asking after the deed, quiet her. No court will favor a woman's memory over our signatures. Sylvia stopped. Holden's face went gray. Keep reading, he said. She did, though each line felt like a step into deeper cold. Harlan Dane had pressured Victor Prout into signing away claim to the south pasture, but the deed had never been properly filed. Eliza Prout had discovered it. Maribel Holbrook had helped copy evidence. Then Eliza died in a fire. The official story had been a stove accident. Holden gripped the bedpost. My father knew. Sylvia could not soften it. Yes, he let me believe my mother was careless. I'm sorry. He let me grieve her as an accident. His voice broke on the last word. Sylvia set the papers down. Holden. He moved away from her, one hand out, struck the bureau with his hip, and cursed. The lamp flame jumped. I defended him, he said. After everything, I defended him. When Mrs. Alder hinted that my mother feared him, I told her grief made women talk nonsense. When I found my mother's sewing box locked, I gave it to him. He said he would keep it safe. Sylvia stood very still. He burned it? She asked. I thought he did, but Mrs. Alder kept the box, and I never asked. He laughed once, bitter and hollow. A blind fool before I was blind. You were a son. I was a coward. She stepped closer. No, I chose the easier truth, because the harder one would have cost me, my father. Sylvia knew that kind of choice. She had made one at the depot when she lied about the letter. She had made one every night since the fire, when she tried not to remember the face beyond the smoke. Sometimes, she said, children survive by believing what would destroy them if they doubted it. Holden turned his scarred eyes toward her. Is that what you did? She went silent. The moment stretched. Downstairs, a door slammed. Mrs. Alder called up. Holden, sheriff's here. Holden took the papers, put them back in the packet. No, Sylvia said. Keep them with us. Safer hidden. They were hidden for years. That did not save anyone. He listened to that, then nodded. Bring them. Sheriff Bell stood in the front room with his hat in both hands and worry on his face. Beside him was a young woman in a dark traveling dress, pale-haired and trembling. Sylvia stopped at the foot of the stairs. Holden sensed her pause. Who is here? Sheriff Bell cleared his throat. Mrs. Clara Dane. Holden went still. Sylvia looked at the woman. Clara Dane was not dead. She stood very much alive, thinner than sorrow, with a bruise fading along her jaw and a little boy half hidden behind her skirt. Holden's voice was barely sound. Clara. The woman flinched at his tone. Holden. Mrs. Alder crossed herself under her breath. Sheriff Bell said, she came to my office this morning. Says she has information about Silas. Clara's eyes moved from Holden to Sylvia and back. There was shame in them, but also fear. I did not die, Clara said. Silas told people I did because it suited him. He sent me east after I lost the child he wanted. Then found me when my sister died and took my son's papers. He said, if I came back, he would see me locked away as unstable. The little boy clutched her skirt. Holden's face showed nothing. That nothing hurt more than anger would have. Why come now? He asked. Clara swallowed. Because Silas said he had found the Holbrook girl. Because he said she had brought the last piece and once he took it from her, the south pasture would finally belong to him. Sylvia felt the room tilt. Holden turned toward her. The last piece. Clara looked at Sylvia. Your aunt had a copy of the true deed. Harlan Dane stole the original years ago, but Maribel kept a traced copy with signatures. Silas searched her house. When he did not find it, he set the fire to frighten her into telling. Sylvia's bandaged hands went cold. No, she whispered. Clara's eyes filled. I am sorry. The kitchen in Ohio returned in a rush. Smoke, heat, her aunt pushing her toward the back door. A man outside shouting, Find the girl then. She'll know. Sylvia, crawling through broken glass, the letter burning in her hand. Her knees weakened. Holden reached out but stopped before touching her. Sylvia. She forced air into her lungs. I saw him. Everyone looked at her. At my aunt's house, Sylvia said. Through the smoke, I saw a man at the window. I did not know his name then. But at church, when Silas looked at my hands, I knew he remembered me. Sheriff Bell's face hardened. Can you swear to that? Sylvia's fear rose like flame. Silas was rich. She was poor. He was respected enough. She was a hungry girl with a torn letter. The town had already chosen once. I can, she said, though her voice shook. Clara stepped forward. I can swear to more. I heard him plan to search the Pruitt house. He believes the deed copy is here, or with Sylvia. Holden's jaw tightened. Let him come. Sheriff Bell shook his head. No, we do this lawful. Lawful, Holden said. Law watched my mother buried under a lie. And law is what will keep you from hanging for shooting Silas Dane in your yard. The room went quiet. Holden's face had turned hard as Sylvia saw then the mistake he was capable of making. He had carried grief so long that vengeance looked to him like justice with its hat on. She stepped close enough that only he could hear. Do not let him make you cruel, she said. His breath caught. I want him punished too, she continued. For my aunt, for your mother, for Clara, for everything. But if you become the man he says you are, he still takes something. Holden's hand trembled. Miss Holbrook, Sheriff Bell said, do you have this deed copy? Sylvia shook her head. I don't know. Then she remembered. Her aunt's torn letter, the stiff seam inside her valise, the way Maribel had shoved not only the letter, but something folded behind the lining before the smoke got too thick. Sylvia had thought the valise felt uneven because the frame was damaged. She ran to the east room. Holden followed, one hand along the wall, faster than caution allowed. Sylvia? She opened the valise on the bed and felt along the incised seam. Her fingers found a ridge. With a hairpin, she worked the stitching loose. A folded oilcloth packet slid free. For a moment, she could not open it. Holden stood in the doorway, breathing hard. It is here, she said. Inside was a copy of the South Pasture deed, traced and signed by two witnesses, Eliza Pruitt and Maribel Holbrook. There was also a short note in Maribel's hand. Sylvia, forgive me for sending you into danger, but truth has no legs unless someone brave carries it. The Pruitt boy was wrong. So were you, long before you knew it. Sylvia sat on the bed. Her aunt had not left her. She had trusted her. All the hunger, fear, and shame of the journey broke open in her chest. Tears came silently at first, then with a force she could not hide. Holden crossed the room and knelt in front of her. He reached slowly, giving her time to refuse, then took her bandaged hands between his gloved ones. I believe you, he said. Those three words entered her like warmth. She bowed her hand over their hands. Everyone looked at me like I was nothing. I did too, he said, voice rough. At first. She looked at him through tears. I heard your hunger, he said, but I still weighed your worth against my fear. I am sorry. This apology was full. No edges, no pride hiding inside it. Sylvia held his hands a little tighter. Downstairs, Clara's little boy began to cry, and Mrs. Alder hushed him gently. Sheriff Bell called for his deputy. The house that had housed secrets for years, filled with footsteps and voices, and the beginning of reckoning. But outside, near the burn barn, a rider watched from the cottonwoods. Silas Dane had come sooner than anyone expected. By sundown, Mercy Creek knew that Clara Dane was alive. By morning, it knew that Sylvia Holbrook had accused Silas Dane of murder and arson. By noon, half the town believed her. Half called her a liar, and the other half pretended not to enjoy the trouble. Sheriff Bell moved Clara and her little boy into the back rooms of the church under Reverend Pike's protection. He took the deed copy and letters into his office, locked them in the iron safe, and sent a rider to the county judge in Abilene. But law travels slower than rumor, and rumor moved through Mercy Creek like prairie fire. At the general store, men argued over whether a poor girl's word could stand against a Dane. At the church, women carried food to Clara, while asking questions that tasted like gossip. At the blacksmith shop, Silas laughed and said Holden Pruitt had finally found a woman desperate enough to help him steal land. Sylvia heard all of it when she came to town with Mrs. Alder for flour. She kept her head up until a boy near the trough called, "Fire girl." Then she nearly stumbled. Mrs. Alder turned so sharply the boy ran. "Cowards start young when adults train them," the older woman said. Sylvia tried to smile, but her mouth would not obey. Across the street, Silas Dane stepped from the bank. He wore a gray coat and a black hat. No bruise, no dust, no sign of guilt. Just a respectable man in a town that liked respectable surfaces. He crossed toward them. Mrs. Alder muttered, "Stay behind me," but Sylvia did not. Silas removed his hat. "Miss Holbrook, Mrs. Alder." Neither woman answered. His smile did not fade. "I hear you've been telling stories." I told the truth," Sylvia said. "Truth requires proof. We have proof." "Do you?" His gaze sharpened. "Funny thing about paper. It burns." Sylvia's burned palms throbbed inside her gloves. Mrs. Alder stepped forward. "Move along, Silas." He ignored her. "I saw your aunt before she died. Did you know that? She begged very prettily. Said you were all she had left. I told her that was unfortunate." Sylvia went white. Mrs. Alder grabbed her arm. Silas leaned closer, voice soft. "Leave town before the judge comes. Tell Pruitt you lied. I will give you enough money to go somewhere. No one knows what a dirty little thing you are." Sylvia's fear turned, slowly, into something steadier. "No," she said. His eyes hardened. "No one will choose you when this gets ugly," he whispered. "Not the town, not Holden. He is using you because he cannot see what you are." A wagon rattled behind them, and for a moment the street noise swallowed her answer. Then Sylvia said, "He sees better than you." Silas smiled once coldly. "We shall find out." That night, Holden found her on the porch steps, staring toward the dark line of town. He had been quieter since Clara returned. Not distant exactly, but crowded by old ghosts. Sylvia had wondered whether seeing Clara, alive in his own way, had reopened a door he thought was sealed. He lowered himself beside her. "Mrs. Alder says Silas spoke to you. She also says if you go after him, she will hit you with a stove lit. She has threatened me with worse." Sylvia looked at his profile. "Will you go after him?" "Yes." His silence answered first. "I want to," he said. "There is an ugly truth in me, Sylvia. I would like to put my hands around his throat and ask him how my mother sounded when she begged." She looked down. "I told you I was not perfect. I never wanted perfect. What did you want?" The question hung between them, too tender and too dangerous. Sylvia folded her hands. "At Fred, a room with a lock, a day without being called shame, and now." She could have answered honestly. She could have said she wanted him to say her name without suspicion. She wanted mornings where he ate her biscuits, even when they were too hard. She wanted his hand searching for hers and finding it. She wanted to stop being a girl people left behind. But love spoken too soon can frighten the wounded. So she said, "Now I want the truth to hold." Holden nodded slowly. "So do I." The next day, the county judge arrived with 2 clerks, a deputy marshal, and enough importance to fill the sheriff's office. A public hearing was set in the town hall because too many citizens were involved, and too many records needed witness. Mercy Creek packed the room. Sylvia sat beside Mrs. Alder on the front bench. Clara sat near Reverend Pike, her son asleep against her lap. Holden stood near the wall, refusing a chair, though Mrs. Alder had told him twice not to be proud. Silas sat at the opposite table with a lawyer from Abilene, and the calm face of a man who had bought his way out of danger before. Judge Whitcomb, an older man with silver hair and tired eyes, called for testimony. Clara spoke first. Her voice shook, but she did not stop. She told how Silas had lied about her death, stolen her son's papers, and planned to force Holden into selling the south pasture. People murmured. Silas's lawyer suggested she was confused by grief. Clara lifted her chin and said grief had clarified what fear once blurred. Then Holden spoke. He told of the bonfire, the cut fence years ago, the debts, the pressure, the old letters between Eliza and Maribel. When asked why he had not come forward earlier, he answered plainly, "Because I was proud enough to mistake pain for proof. Because I trusted my father when I should have trusted my mother. Because blindness taught me many things, but it did not teach me fast enough to see my own denial." The room went silent. Sylvia looked at him and felt something in her chest open. Then it was her turn. She walked to the front with her bandaged hands visible. The townspeople who had stared at her from the depot stared again. But this time, she did not feel like a stray. She felt like a witness. She told of the letter, the fire in Ohio, her aunt's last words, the man at the window, her arrival in Mercy Creek, Silas' recognition, his threat outside the bank. Silas' lawyer stood. "Miss Holbrook, is it not true that you lied at the depot about why you came?" "Oh, yes," Sylvia said. A murmur moved through the hall. The lawyer smiled. "So, you admit you are willing to lie when it suits you?" Sylvia's face heated. "I lied because I was afraid. Convenient. She said, surprising him. "Fear is convenient for men like your client. It keeps women quiet, poor people ashamed, and towns satisfied with easy stories." The murmur changed. The lawyer frowned. "You expect this court to believe that a starving woman arriving with no money just happened to carry a deed that benefits Mr. Prout?" "No," Sylvia said. "I expect this court to believe my aunt died, protecting what rich men tried to bury." Silas' face twitched. The judge leaned forward. "Miss Holbrook, can you identify the man you saw outside your aunt's house?" Sylvia turned towards Silas. The hall doors burst open before she could speak. Smoke rolled in. For one horrifying second, Sylvia thought memory had swallowed the room. Then someone shouted from outside, "Fire! The church!" Clara screamed. Her son. The town erupted. Men shoved toward the door. Women cried out. Reverend Pike ran first, followed by Sheriff Bell. Smoke blackened the sky beyond the windows. Clara's little boy had been left sleeping in the church back room, under the care of an elderly widow. Silas stood slowly. Sylvia saw his face before he arranged it into concern. He had done it, or ordered it. One more fire to destroy one more truth, one more witness, one more inconvenient life. Holden moved toward the door, but the crowd surged around him. Someone knocked his shoulder. Blindness turned the chaos cruel. He reached for the wall and found only bodies. Sylvia pushed through to him. "Holden," he caught her voice. "Where?" "Church, east side." Smoke heavy. Clara's boy. Inside, they ran. Outside, Mercy Creek had become a storm of bells, buckets, horses, and smoke. Flames licked from the church side windows. Not yet full, but spreading fast, along dry curtains. The widow who had watched the child sobbed near the steps, coughing. He was sleeping. "I tried." The smoke. Clara fought the sheriff's hold. My son. Holden stepped toward the smoke. Sylvia grabbed his arm. "No, I know that church. You cannot see the fire. I know the rooms. You will die." His scarred eyes turned toward her. "Tell me where the flame is, Holden. Tell me." The hard choice stood between them. Let a child burn or guide a blind man into fire. Trust his courage, or save his life against his will, and lose what made him Holden. Sylvia's whole body shook. Then she took his hand and placed it on her shoulder. "Follow me." "No, you stay out. You need my eyes, and you need to live." So does the boy. For one breath. He looked as if he might refuse. Then he nodded. They covered their mouths with wet cloths from a bucket line and plunged inside. Heat struck like a wall. Smoke clawed at Sylvia's throat. The church she had sat in only days before was now a blur of orange and black. She led Holden low, one hand gripping his wrist, the other stretched ahead. Left, she coughed. Pew, step over. He moved with terrifying trust. A beam cracked overhead. Sylvia flinched. Talk to me, he said. Door ahead. Back room. Flames on right wall. The latch sticks high. She reached, found it, burned her fingers through the cloth, and cried out. Holden shoved the door with his shoulder. It burst open. Inside, under the small table, Clara's boy whimpered. Sylvia dropped to her knees. Come here, sweetheart. He crawled to her, coughing. She wrapped him in her shawl. The window behind them shattered, feeding the fire with air. Flames jumped along the wall. Holden took the child. I have him. The way back is worse, Sylvia said. Vestry door, blocked by boxes. Move them. She dragged one crate aside, then another. Her burned hands screamed. Smoke thickened. Holden held the boy against his chest and turned his body to shield him from heat. Hurry, he said, then coughed hard. Sylvia found the vestry door and pushed. It opened into a narrow side passage leading to the yard. Here. They stumbled out just as part of the church roof caved behind them. Clara's scream broke into a sob when she saw her son. Holden placed the boy in her arms and staggered. Sylvia caught him, but he was too heavy. They sank together to the ground. The town surrounded them. For once, no one whispered. Sylvia's hair had come loose, her dress was scorched, and her hands bled through fresh burns. Holden's coat smoked at the sleeve. He coughed until Mrs. Alder pushed through with water and hearses. Clara held her child and wept. Thank you. Oh Lord, thank you. Sheriff Bell turned on Silas, who stood at the edge of the crowd. But Silas was already backing away toward the horses. Stop him, someone shouted. Silas ran. Holden tried to rise. Sylvia pressed him down. No, hell, get away. No, she said, looking past him. At the hitching rail, the blacksmith and two ranch hands blocked Silas' path. Reverend Pike, face smudged with soot, held a shotgun he looked deeply unhappy to be using. Sheriff Bell reached Silas a moment later and slammed him against the rail. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the respectable man was bound. Sylvia looked down at Holden. You do not have to chase him. His breathing was ragged. No, no. The town can carry justice now. Holden's hand found hers. His glove closed gently around her wounded fingers. Did you choose me? He asked hoarsely. Or the boy? Sylvia looked at Clara rocking her child, at the church burning, at the town finally seeing what shame had hidden. Yes, she said. Holden gave a broken laugh that turned into a cough, and she held on. The church bell did not ring the next Sunday because the bell tower had burned. So Mercy Creek gathered in the open air beside the chart foundation, under a sky washed clean by rain. Benches had been carried from the town hall. Hymnals smelled faintly of smoke. The congregation sang without walls around them, and their voices drifted across the street where the depot platform stood empty in the morning light. Sylvia Holbrook sat in the front row. No one asked her to move. Her hands were bandaged again, but this time the wrappings were clean and carefully tied by Mrs. Alder, who had cried while doing it and denied every tear. Clara sat beside Sylvia with her son tucked close. Holden stood near the end of the bench, hat in hand, listening to the hymn he did not yet know how to sing again. Silas Dane had been taken to Abilene under guard. His hired man confessed before the county judge finished supper, saying Silas paid him to set the church fire as a distraction and to burn the sheriff's office if possible. The old letters, deed copy, and Clara's testimony held. So did Sylvia's. So did the truth. Harlan Dane's fraud was entered into record. Victor Pruitt's part in hiding. It was entered too, though the dead could not be tried. The south pasture belonged, as it always had, to the Pruitt ranch. But truth did not heal all at once. Some townspeople avoided Sylvia because apology cost more pride than they wished to spend. Others came awkwardly with pies, mended gloves, and words that limped. The station master, Abner Cole, removed his hat when he saw her after the hearing. "Miss Holbrook," he said, eyes lowered, "I spoke hard when you had no one." Sylvia waited. He swallowed. "I am sorry." She looked past him to the platform where she had nearly fallen from hunger. "I needed help that day." "Yes, Mom. You gave me suspicion." "Yes, Mom." She nodded. "Then remember the difference next time." He looked as though she had struck him and spared him in the same breath. "I will." Mrs. Dane did not apologize. She left town to stay with a cousin, her curtains drawn and trunks packed at dawn. No one stopped her. Clara stayed. Holden offered her the small tenant cottage by the Eastfield until she decided where to go. It was not romance, not old love returning, not the foolish neatness of stories that make every past wound useful. It was simply repair. One afternoon, Sylvia found Holden on the porch listening to Clara's boy laugh near the water pump. The sound seemed to pain and comfort him at once. "You loved her," Sylvia said. Holden did not pretend not to understand. "A long time ago, does seeing her again hurt?" "Yes." Sylvia looked down at her hands. He turned toward her. "Not in the way you fear." She still. Holden leaned back in his chair. "I loved Clara when I believed love was being admired. I was young enough to think a woman's smile could prove my worth. When she left, I thought I lost love. I think I had only lost a mirror." Sylvia sat beside him. "What is love, then?" she asked softly. He was quiet a long while. "My baby, it is someone telling you where the fire is," he said, "and walking in any way." Tears rose suddenly, but she blinked them back. He reached into his coat and brought out a folded paper. "I have something to ask you." Sylvia's heart lurched. "What is it?" "A letter." She laughed once unsteadily. "I have had poor luck with letters. This one is whole." He held it toward her, and she took it. The handwriting was careful, uneven in places, as though formed by a man not used to writing without sight. She glanced at him. "You wrote this?" Mrs. Alder set the paper straight. "I did the rest. Took most of the night, and several insults from the ink bottle." Sylvia unfolded it. "Miss Sylvia Holbrook, I am a man with more land than ease, more regret than wisdom, and more fear than I like confessed. When you came to Mercy Creek, I offered work because I heard hunger. I held back trust because I feared another hidden flame. Since then, you have read me the truth, challenged my anger, guarded my soul from vengeance, and walked with me into smoke when I needed ice. The Pritt Ranch needs a housekeeper, but that is not what I ask. It needs courage, laughter, stubborn mercy, and someone who knows that broken things are not worthless. So do I. If you wish to leave, I will pay your wages, buy your ticket, and thank God you lived. If you wish to stay, I ask you to stay as my wife, not out of debt, not out of pity, not because the town expects it, but because I choose you before every watching face that once called you shame." Holden Prout, the porch blurred. Sylvia held the paper carefully, as if it might fly apart like the burned one. "You are offering marriage," she whispered. "I am. Because people talk. People will talk if a rooster lays square eggs. This is not for them, because you need help. I do need help. But I can hire hands. I cannot hire the way my heart knows your step before you reach the door." Her breath caught. Holden's jaw tightened with nerves. "I know I am not an easy man. I go cold when I am afraid. I hold too tight to maps in my head. I speak sharp before I speak true. I cannot promise never to grieve badly." Sylvia folded the letter against her chest. He continued, "But I can promise I will not make you earn kindness by proving you are innocent every morning. I can promise this house will never call you stray. And I can promise that when Mercy Creek looks at you, it will see my wife if you want that name." Sylvia looked across the yard. The burned barn was being taken down board by board. In its place, Holden planned to build a new one with a stone foundation and wider doors. The south pasture shone green beyond it, watered by the spring so many had lied to possess. Mrs. Alder stood near the kitchen window, pretending not to watch. Clara's boy chased a chicken and lost. A life stood before Sylvia. Not an easy one, not polished, but real. She thought of her Aunt Maribel, who had hidden truth in a valise seam and trusted a frightened girl to carry it. She thought of the depot, the dust, the laughter, the hunger. She thought of Holden's voice asking if she had eaten, his anger, his apology, his hand in the smoke. "I am plain," she said, "because some old wounds speak before the heart can stop them." Holden frowned. "What? I am poor. I came with nothing. I lied to you. I have scars on my hands. I wake some nights smelling smoke. I might never be the kind of woman people expect beside a ranch owner." Holden leaned toward her. "Sylvia, I cannot see plain." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I know your voice when you are trying not to cry," he said. "I know you hum when you knead dough now, though you think no one hears. I know you put the coffee tin back exactly where I need it. I know you stood up to Silas when fear had every right to own you. I know your hands shook in the fire and still did not let go." He swallowed. "If that is plain, then the world has been using the word wrong." Sylvia covered her mouth with the letter. Mrs. Alder shouted from the window, "Girl, answer before he talks himself into foolishness." Holden closed his eyes. "That woman is a plague." Sylvia laughed through tears. It was not a dirty laugh. It broke halfway. It sounded like something frozen beginning to thaw. "Jahers," she said. Holden went still. "Yes, yes," Holden purred. "I will stay. I will marry you. Not because I need shelter, though I once did. Not because I owe you, though I am grateful. Because I choose you too." He reached for her, and she met him halfway. Their first embrace was careful because of her hands and his bruised ribs from the church fire. But tenderness did not need strength to be complete. He held her like a man who had found the door out of a room he thought would stay dark forever. The wedding took place 3 weeks later in the half-built church. There were no stained glass windows yet, no bell, and no proper floor near the back. Sunlight came through open beams. Wildflowers filled jars along the aisle. Mrs. Alder made a cake that leaned slightly to one side and threatened anyone who mentioned it. Clara stood beside Sylvia, holding her son's hand. Sheriff Bell wore his best coat. Reverend Pike's voice broke when he spoke of love bearing all things, believing all things, hoping all things, enduring all things. Mercy Creek came, not all with pure hearts. Some came from curiosity, some from guilt, some because weddings were rare entertainment. But when Sylvia walked down the aisle in a simple cream dress Mrs. Alder had altered from old fabric in Eliza Pruitt's sewing room, the whispers did not wound her. Holden stood waiting with his hat in his hands. His eyes could not follow her, but his face turned the moment he heard her step. After the vows, when Reverend Pike pronounced them husband and wife, Holden did not kiss her quickly for the crowd. He bent his head and whispered, "My eye." Sylvia smiled. Yes, only then did he kiss her. The town clapped. Mrs. Alder cried openly this time and dared anyone to remark on it. Clara smiled with a sadness that had finally made room for peace. At the supper afterward, Sheriff Bell stood and cleared his throat. "I owe Mrs. Sylvia Pruitt a public apology," he said. The yard quieted. Sylvia felt Holden's hand find hers beneath the table. The sheriff continued, "When she arrived here, I saw trouble before I saw need. I let fear speak faster than mercy. This town did the same. She carried truth when most of us would not have carried her valise. We are in her debt." One by one, others stood. The blacksmith apologized for staying silent at the depot. The station master apologized again, this time in front of everyone. A woman who had whispered behind a fan brought Sylvia a quilt made by the church circle and said, "It is late, but it is meant." Sylvia accepted it. Not every apology healed, but each honest one laid a plank over a burned place. Near sunset, Holden led Sylvia away from the noise toward the south pasture. He moved with his cane in one hand and her arm in the other, not because he could not walk alone, but because walking together had become its own language. The spring ran clear through grass, catching the last gold of day. Cattle grazed beyond the ridge. The new barn frame stood behind them, raw wood bright against the sky. Sylvia knelt by the water and touched it with her fingertips. "My aunt died for this truth," she said. Holden removed his hat. "Me mother too. They should have seen it made right." For a while, they listened to the spring. Then Holden said, "We can plant 2 trees here, one for Maribel, one for my mother." Sylvia looked up at him. "Eliza." He nodded. "Eliza. And when they grow, we sit under them and tell our children that women no one believes saved this land. Our children." The words settled gently, not as demand, but as promise. Sylvia stood and slipped her hand into his. "I used to think being chosen meant someone did not notice what was broken," she said. Holden's tone brushed her knuckles. "And now I think it means they know and stay tender." He turned toward her. "Then I will spend my life learning tenderness. You will need practice." "I suspected as much," she laughed, and this time it came whole. Behind them, the ranch lamps began to glow. Mrs. Alder called from the porch that supper would not wait on romance. Clara's boy shouted that the chicken had stolen a biscuit. Men working on the barn answered with laughter. The Pritt ranch, once hollowed by lies and fire, sounded alive again. Sylvia looked back at the house that had given her a locked room, then a table, then a name. She thought of the girl at the depot, hungry and shaking, with dust on her hem and shame pressed into every stare. She wished she could reach back and tell that girl to hold on. One person would hear what others refused to see. One hard, wounded cowboy would offer bread before trust, apology after fear, and love after truth. Holden touched the folded letter she still carried in her pocket, the burned one that had brought her there. "Do you ever wish it had not come?" he asked. Sylvia looked at the new barn frame, the spring, the open sky, and the man beside her. "I wish the fire had never taken what it took," she said, "but I do not wish away the road that brought me home." Holden bowed his head until his forehead rested lightly against hers. The sun dropped behind the ridge, and Mercy Creek softened into evening. No train whistle called Sylvia away. No crowd stood judging. No locked secret burned between them. There was only the sound of water, the warmth of his hand, and a future built not from perfect beginnings, but from the brave, stubborn choice to stay.